Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we talk about the new jersey release by the Detroit Lions. We'll talk about first impressions, bring up our own first jerseys, and see what the general line of thinking is about this new release. We'll also take a final closer look at the NFL draft on some players to keep an eye on and some positions we think the Lions might be zeroing in on. Finally, we'll talk about the draft location itself, the happenings in Detroit, plus things you can do if you can't make it to Detroit for draft weekend, but want a Detroit Lions experience. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hey everyone, this is Lomas Brown, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Today, I'm joined by not just one, but two guests, and these are both regulars that you are all familiar with. We have Coach Jerry Angers, of course, named Michigan High School Coach of the Year as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also mentored numerous players to the college level and some all the way to the NFL. And we also have James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can hear him on the Get Around podcast. That drops on Mondays. Jerry, James, great to have both you guys here.
Love it. Love being with favorite Lions fans.
All right. Well, guys, let's start with the freshest news. We're like hours off of this news and maybe more than just a few hours based on when you saw the leaks come out. But the Detroit Lions have new football jerseys. I'm sure most of the listeners, if not all, have already seen them. But here's the quick nuts and bolts. We got blue jerseys with white lettering as opposed to the gray lettering that we had most recently. The white jerseys have blue lettering. They have quite a familiar look, I think, to Lions fans of the 1990s. There are some other differences from that, and you guys can get into some of those. And then there's the we're back in black thing. Black uniforms with blue lettering and a blue alternate helmet. And, of course, pants can be mixed and matched with some of these uniforms for different looks. So what are your thoughts on the new look? Who wants to start here?
I'll start rolling with it. I love the black and blue because aren't we the black and blue division? I mean, and maybe that's what they're looking at. Maybe that's what they're going back to. And again, my thought on uniforms is, I was the old school guy, you guys. I was the Penn State with the white and the Alabama with the number on the helmet and staying the same. But today's day and age, if you look good, you play good, and I think that's what all these teams are shooting for. Who looks the best. And I think Oregon started all that with us. Now everybody else has got to try to match it. So, but anyways, I'm looking forward to the black and blue. That's for sure.
How about you, James?
Yeah, the black is really the only thing that's kind of really different. I mean, the other jerseys aren't very much of a departure at all. Like you said, they kind of go harken back to the Barry Sanders days a little bit more and everything. The wording on the inside of the collar is cool, but nobody's ever going to see that when somebody's wearing it. So that doesn't really make much of a difference. I do like the black thing. Dan Campbell's a big Metallica fan, so maybe it's a Black Album thing.
Well, Coach, I heard what you said there about, you gotta make the adjustments. Life's a little bit different, a little bit more modern here. I'm going to say when you have something that's already good, just don't mess it up. And I think that's what the Lions were kind of going for on this. They cleaned it up. It looks good. That black and blue division thing, the Lions said that in one of their promos. This is the black and blue division. And at first I was like, I don't know, man, going to black just because we remember the 05 to 07 era. We equate that with Matt Millen and stuff. But black's a pretty cool color, especially with those alternate helmets like that. And we are the black and blue division. So I get that as well. And, another line the Lions said was they're inspired by yesterday's heroes handed off to today's. So I think it is paying a little homage to the 1990s.
Good call. I like it. I think I agree with you on that one.
Mm-hmm. I think it'd be pretty cool to see like a chrome silver helmet. But that may be just dreaming.
Kind of like the old school throwbacks where it was just the although they weren't chrome, I guess they were just silver helmets with those blue jerseys.
Yeah, more of a shiny chrome silver.
Something like what Notre Dame did with their gold, but just chrome it up, really make it bright.
Yeah.
So, well, I've got some friends who have weighed in on this. I don't know if you guys have heard from other people. Some people are like, eh. Some are like, I like the old ones better. Some are like, I like these. I guess the easy thing to say is nothing's ever universally liked out there, right? As far as jerseys or anything really. I mean, maybe Top Gun 2 is universally liked. I think that got pretty good reviews across the board. But even the new Star Wars movies were not universally liked, and everybody likes, well, most people like Star Wars. But I like the white lettering back. And Coach, you got to agree, it's easier to see the numbers from the sideline when they got white letters.
Oh, I thought so too. I mean, that was when I looked up, again, you look at that thing because all the scouting and stuff that I've done over the years, I don't know how many times where I was trying to figure out who the player was or who carried the ball or who made the tackle. And I think it's going to, that's going to pop out for us, especially when you're in the stands, whether, wherever your seating is. So I think I agree with you on that. I like the number transfer, and it's going to pop, and people are going to be able to identify who they're looking at quick.
Well, and the other nice thing is, I don't think there's anything too controversial about this. If there's anything controversial, there wasn't a drastic enough change, right, James? I mean, remember Denver and Tampa when they had their uniform changes in the late 90s? Like, Tampa was liked pretty right away, but those Denver uniforms, it took a while to win that Denver crowd over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was a pretty big change. So I think maybe a lot of teams are worried about that. I mean, but the Lions have a pretty classic look, so I guess think they just wanted to tweak it a little bit, and redo it so that they can sell more jerseys. That's always a big nice bonus.
It is. And, Fanatics did a nice job. I believe it was Fanatics that leaked this early. That's what I had heard. And I guess the one big thing I want is I don't want these NFL jerseys to be like the Fanatics Major League Baseball jerseys, because that was the big thing. Those jerseys look rough. There are sweat stains on those baseball jerseys. At least one jersey ripped. I think a guy slid into home plate. So these aren't made by Fanatics, so I don't expect that.
And they were see-through. That was the thing with the baseball ones, is that the pants were see-through when the players put them on.
That's not good.
No, so again, Fanatics is selling the jerseys, but I think Nike is still making these jerseys, if I'm not mistaken on that one. So, all right, well, last thoughts on the jerseys. I think they look good. I think they represent. I've always been a big fan of the Honolulu blue, the blue jersey. That's my favorite of these. I know the other ones look good as well. And it reminds me of my first jersey, which is that Chris Spielman jersey. And I love it. So any final thoughts, James, on the jerseys?
No, I think we pretty well covered it.
All right, Coach, anything you want to weigh in on?
I'm just waiting for them to produce a Ford Bronco in Honolulu blue with a black top, and I'll go buy one tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah, there's got to be some crossovers with that, right? We haven't seen that yet. So that could be in the works here.
Yep.
Well, the other thing that's in the works is the NFL draft. It is officially 1 week away from right now. It's actually 2 hours less, or an hour less than a week away. Let's talk about players we like, positions the Lions might target, and final thoughts as we get ready. So, guys, here's a couple things, some questions I've come up with, and I really want your insight on this before we start getting into the players, because there's so many variables you can think about. The one is, which position drafted early would impact the Lions most immediately? Now, we know the positions they might be looking at are offensive line, wide receiver, defensive back, maybe defensive line. But if they were to, what position in the first round would have that most immediate impact potential? Would it be a wide receiver? Would it be a defensive back? James, we'll start with you. What are you thinking?
I think it's more likely than a lot of fans think that they take a wide receiver early. Not necessarily in the first round, but I think that it's just I think it'd be a good move just as insurance for Jameson Williams in case he's not what they thought he is. I think he's going to develop and make a step here in the third year. But they need, they lost Josh Reynolds, so they need another receiver there. So I think that's maybe a little bit bigger on Brad Holmes' mind than a lot of fans think. D-line and corner are the obviously other two big answers.
All right. And so again, though, looking at the biggest impact, which position, if they drafted it, would probably have the biggest impact this year? I see wide receiver. That makes a lot of sense. And that could be an immediate one right there, adding to that arsenal. Coach, what are you thinking? Which position could have that most impact immediately?
Well, I think, like you said, I think you look at how quick certain positions come off the board. and how deep their board is for let's talk cornerbacks just for and the only reason I brought up cornerbacks is last year we looked for a cornerback in the future. They had 7 guys come in, 30 of the guys for those interviews, 7 last year. Okay. But then we went out and we had signed some quarterbacks, so that need kind of fell. This year we did the exact same thing. And this year they had 8 quarterbacks in for their 30 the 30 in personal interviews that they had. So that's one of the things is that Holmes and them playing games on who they're going to draft and how they're going to draft it. So you look at the other thing I look at is everybody's pushing these quarterbacks and they're going to be the first 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or come off. I think there's a lot of people jockeying to push those to get those positions so they can grab that second wide receiver or that third wide receiver. So, I agree with James on that we could be going after the wide receiver, and we know Holmes and Campbell will work. We're going to take the best available thing. And I think that all determines we're all in fantasy league, and the tight end comes off the board and the tight end comes off the board. And you're like, oh my God, I got to get a tight end because that's my guy. So, but I don't disagree with the wide receiver concept because we know they'll do whatever it takes to get that best person out there. But I'm still leaning cornerback or the edge rushers pretty deep.
All right. For me, I think it could be the wide receiver that would have the most impact as far as cracking the starting lineup right away that has that potential. But I also think offensive line could also have the most immediate impact in a sneaky way. And that is if there was to be an injury on the offensive line, we don't have a lot of depth right there. And so that's the first pick, most impact. And that's what they could do. But you could also see them drafting, they're going to look for the best player, the best fit. It could be a player that they want down the line that's going to be most impactful in year 2 or year 3, because our team is in a different position. And we're not just looking at this year. We're looking at next year, the year after. We know that we have some guys whose contracts will be coming up or they're a little bit later in their careers, or we don't have a lot of depth. Offensive line is one of those spots. Defensive back is another spot. So, Coach, I'll stay with you. If they didn't go for a person that was going to have a direct impact on the starting lineup this year, what depth spot down the line would be the most impactful, do you think? What position?
And I'm going to go right back to the cornerback position. Again, they had 8 guys in there. We have, we've gone to the free agent market and got some, guys. We lost the guy, of course, off-field event. And I think that's one of the ones that they could do and pull somebody in. Are they looking for an immediate starter in that position? No. And then the other thing, we'll go back to, and again, the reason I don't think about the offensive line is deep. There's a ton of offensive linemen out there. And with what do we have, 4 picks in the first 100? Is that correct? I believe something like that. Does that sound right, James?
Carlton Davis trade. Well, they traded one of those for Carlton Davis. So 3, yeah.
3. So there's going to be an opportunity to do that, to be able to grab one of those offensive linemen to help back up because, you got to look at, we have some young offensive linemen, but we have some pretty old ones that are beat up. So, but I still think that cornerback position, and of course, any one of those DNs that they could get. But they're, again, where are they going to fall down the board? So I just think the corner, if the best corner is available that they believe is going to be a first-day starter or somebody they're going to work with, they'll grab them.
All right. How about you, James? What position do you like for a depth down the line that would have the most impact?
I think they're going to, they have to have somebody, Davenport's only a 1-year deal. So they're going to have to put somebody at defensive end opposite of Hutchinson. That's a threat. So I think that's a position where somebody could step in right away. And if they play well, they're a rookie on a 3 or 4 year deal, and they play as good as Davenport does, they're going to give the playing time to him because Davenport's on a 1-year deal. So let the rookie play. So that's one where I could see somebody kind of stepping in if they can come in and camp and at least play pretty close to Marcus Davenport, that they could see the field a lot.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to say the 2 spots I see is I still see offensive line as being very important because
Mhm.
Zeitler came over on a 1-year deal, and he's older. And so he might be gone next year, and that can kind of keep the cost down on the offensive line if we can get a starter into the offensive line. The other is, you guys already talked about wide receiver. If we're extending Amon-Ra St. Brown at a $23 to $25 million deal, that wide receiver room is going to get quite expensive. And if you can draft a guy on that rookie contract in a position that is very expensive, that could also actually be not just impactful right now, but a few years down the line.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the other part of that too is, we do have Green. We picked up Green last year. I think Peoples Jones was a huge keep, because he had that good year before that. So, but I totally agree. We're gonna need some guys that are gonna take some pay cuts or come in on rookie contracts so that we can still afford and not overprice that wide receiver room. So. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting. One thing on that D line, I want to jump in. We had the Betts kid from the Canadian League came in. I mean that's another one, and then you got Houston, got what you call it, coming off injury. So how do those guys stand? Within the Lions, and how comfortable do they feel with them is going to make that big decision. But there are some splash DNs out there, guys. Some first day starters, plug and play. And there's some out there that are going to be development, pretty good. I mean, I'm going to throw one in there because the Hunt kid, I know we're not getting into players, but the Jalix Hunt that played at Houston Christian University, he's a DN now. I don't know if you guys know about him. And these are just things I've been thinking about that you can get late in the round. He's 6'4", 252-pound DN. Okay. He played safety at Cornell. He transferred his body into a defensive end. These are guys that I'm looking at going, there's somebody the Lions might say, hey, we don't have to take somebody in the first, second round because that's going to be a guy we can develop. So I just kind of threw that out there because I know it's not talking about player and stuff wise, but I think those are things that are going to come into play down the line.
Well, I think you're right there, Jerry, because we think the Lions want offensive line. They want wide receiver. They want defensive back. We thought they were going defensive back at 6 last year until 5 minutes before their pick. And so now drafting this late in the first round at 29, there's so many variables. They could move up if there's a wide receiver they see or a player that falls a few spots into the 20s or something, or they could move back and pick up an extra second round or an extra third round pick. We don't know how that's going to play out, but let's start looking at some players you guys might like to see the Lions target in the first round. So, James, let's start with you. Is there a position that you're hoping the Lions do target? Is it that wide receiver position? And if so, is there a player or two that you're like, these are the couple guys that I hope they get it, and maybe they can get them at 29, or maybe they need to move up a little bit?
I don't know if the way the mocks are falling and stuff like that, if wide receiver is going to, unless somebody falls, make sense at 29. I think my wide receiver makes a little bit more sense in the second or third for them. Just the way the positions are falling. I think it's better at 29. There's corners there, there's defensive linemen there, there's offensive linemen there. Those guys are all ones that can fill a role on this team. So I think that's probably where they go, unless some wide receiver that they just don't expect to be there completely falls. Then obviously they may jump at it. I also see a pretty real possibility that they trade down, and try to get that extra pick that they traded away for Carlton Davis, pick up another second or third round pick in the first day. Cause this draft is fairly deep in that second, third round area in their positions that they want to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Depending on how the draft falls, if there is a run, like we talked about it, then there might not be someone that have that first round grade that we talked about. And there's a very good chance an offensive lineman could be sitting there with that first round grade. And that's not going to excite a lot of people in the fan base to grab an offensive lineman. But Coach, talk about the value of that and talk about any players you might like to see the Lions target in that first round.
Well, the offensive line, there was coming out of the combine, there were 15 offensive linemen with first round grades. 15 offense linemen with first round grades. And then, of course, there was, 7 quarterbacks, I mean, and then you start that up and say, well, God, there's only 32 picks, or 30, so those are the things I agree, James, if you do have those number of offense linemen with those grades and you have one or two of them, that the Lions are looking at saying, boy, we'd really enjoy having that guy then, or we could use that guy, or that guy's going to give us depth, or he's a plug and he's going to play right away, or he's going to need a year under his belt, then I think, you could wait or trade down, like James said, and stack up a couple in there and grab a couple of those guys. I mean, look what we did last year. We trade down, trade up, get the guys that we want. So how they fall on the board. So anyway, when you look at those different outs linemen with the I think 15 or 17 first round grades, I don't remember when it came out to, there are just so many guys out there that I'm watching the combine going, oh my God, would he look great in the Lions uniform, the new black and blue Lions uniform. And you got the Borgelini kid from Wisconsin. He had the fastest 40. But that did get beat by Cole Spencer out of Texas Tech at his pro day. Just putting that out there because I work with Cole Spencer up in Marquette. But the BB from Kent State, the Zach Frazier kid from West Virginia. You guys know about him. He was a 4-time state champ in high school. This is stuff I look at. And I really like this one. He's a 4-time state champ in high school. He was 159-2. He's a 4.0. He's a center. He loves run blocking. And let's talk about his wrestling background. His junior year, his longest match was 51 seconds. So guys, and I'm bringing that up because those are guys that are probably going to fall, maybe to the 3rd round, maybe to the 4th round, that we could target, and they would be a great fit for the Detroit Lions. So, I think they talked about the O-line depth. They talked about the wide receiver depth. So,
James, you cover a ton of high school sports. Talk about that resume that coach just laid out there.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, to have a record like that, I mean, that's kind of almost like JJ McCarthy type of record. I mean, between his high school and college and what he did and stuff. I could totally see them. Offensive line could be a position where they can get it later, I think. One of those positions where I don't know that they can necessarily get later is an edge rusher. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's the pick at 29. Edge rusher kind of really falls off after the 2nd round or middle 2nd round, I think, kind of. The Nealand kid from Western Michigan, maybe supposed to be like a 3rd round pick. Maybe a fit, but I don't know a whole lot about him specifically. But so I think edge rusher could be that pick at 29 as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. If they stay at 29, which, again, we don't know if that'll happen. I guess if we were playing the odds, we don't think it's going to happen. But the Lions could use that to get more ammunition if they traded back. Because last year we had 2 first rounds, 2 second rounds, and 2 third rounds. We have 1 third, 1 second, 1 first this year. And we have a 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th. This is like the least amount of stuff we've had to draft with since like the first draft that Brad Holmes had, which was 1 first, 1 second, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, and a 7th. Now, the nice thing is we've built up a pretty darn good roster. Brad Holmes and company have put together a pretty nice roster. So we don't have as many holes, but it also means that, I guess fans shouldn't expect the same return on the draft this year from last year. Would you guys say that's fair?
Oh, yeah. They just don't have the same number of picks, like you said, of the last couple of seasons. And obviously not picking as high either. So, that makes a big difference there. He did that first year, he did move around though, and ended up with, I think he started out with no 6th round picks, ended up with 2, and they ended up being 2 pretty good players in Malcolm Rodriguez and James Houston. There's no doubt. I think that he'll move around at spots in the draft, and I would not be shocked whatsoever if he moved down from 29 into the early 2nd round, because for the positions that they want, they can get, I think, the same level of player there, and then pick up like another 3rd round pick where they can have 2 in the 3rd round, and then they can get that center or guard that they want and address another spot there.
Now, last year I had some strong feelings about ways I thought the Lions would go, especially, with the Jameson Williams suspension. I was like, I think they're going to go for another offensive weapon early, and I thought tight end made a lot of sense. I think most people did with the Hockenson trade having happened earlier that season. We didn't necessarily think they would go with running back at number 12 the way they did, but it worked out pretty darn good. This year, I have no clue what direction they're going to go. I think it's going to depend on what player falls to them. But let's start talking about guys you like. Who are some guys you specifically like in the first or second round if they can fall to the Lions? Coach, let's start with you.
Well, I think, Kool-Aid, I've loved Kool-Aid all year. He's another one of those guys that, you watch, cornerback wise, I know the Mitchell kid out of Toledo's, he's throwing some good numbers out there, for those guys. Robinson from Missouri, Darius Robinson, the D lineman, he plays from Canton, Michigan. The thing, he's another one. Nealon again from Western. He had great numbers. I saw, I watched probably 3 or 4 of his games, just from, Mac Nation when they're playing those weeknights. He's another one, hands down. If you got that somehow we could trade up, get picks and everything perfect, Fisk, hands down. I mean, that guy is just a monster. And again, who knows? And here, let's go back to that. We don't, any of us that are going down to the draft and we're going to be in that crowd or in that area, we're hoping they don't trade out of the first. We're hoping they trade up and get a fifth guy and come up with something else, and so that the place will go crazy. But whatever's going to make the team better. But I think those are the guys that from the defense side that I really would love to have in the blue and black.
Yeah, I'm going to be there too, and if they trade down, I'll be fine with it.
Yeah,
because I know that you get Holmes extra picks, he's going to make it work. And the Robinson from Penn State is another guy at 29 that if he's there, he would. I mean, his 40 time at the combine was ridiculous. For a guy that's in, almost 260 to run a 4.48 coming off the edge opposite Hutchinson, that would just be mouth-watering for the Lions defense.
Yeah, they're definitely, going from that defense. Dallas Turner's another one, but you can go on and on about those guys. So, one or two of those guys may fall into that second, like you said. We trade back to it, we pick him up and get an old lineman or get a wide receiver. So,
it should be interesting. Johnny Newton from Illinois would be another one, I think. If they want, because they're kind of talking about defensive tackle, like where they're looking to kind of maybe making a little bit of a draft pick there of high. I've just heard a lot. So Johnny Newton from Illinois kind of really fits what they like, the mold of player that they like at defensive tackle.
Nice. And now I'm sure the listeners have heard a good number of names that people have talked about. They've talked about Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Let's do a little deep dive. I know you guys have looked at this much deeper than I have. And let's look at some of those guys that the Lions should maybe consider late. Like we already talked about it. We know that sorry, I got to fix this. I was on the wrong thing. I'll fix this. We know the Lions and Brad Holmes have done a great job getting players late, like in the 6th round with Malcolm Rodriguez and James Houston. Amon-Ra St. Brown the year before in the 4th round. So, Coach, let's start with you. Who are some players that maybe people aren't thinking about in the first 3 rounds, but maybe in round 4 or 5 is a player that you think, or 2, the Lions would be wise to consider?
Well, I think, one of the other things that we had looked at or, talked about are, do we need another tight end? We did get Brock back. Are they going to go something like that? One of the guys that I really liked at the combine was is it Sunnott, Sinnott? He's a tight end H-back out of Kansas City, K-State. He was one of those guys that kind of just stuck out. That blue collar. They say, oh, he doesn't move well, or he doesn't do this right, or he doesn't do that right, but he likes to block and stuff like that. So he was kind of one of the ones that. You looked at and you said, hey, he's probably going to be a 5th or 6th rounder too. 4th round is, how many of these guys are going to fall to it? And I'm going to go back to that hunt from Houston Christian University, the guy that went from a safety, developed himself into a defensive end. And I think those are guys that, may be there that are going to have some upside, that are going to be rookies and we can work with. And Robinson, again, I'm going to go back to Robinson from Missouri. He had some good numbers. He didn't start playing football to a junior in high school. So he's another one of those growth guys, that you see, and what can we make of him, and where can he fit in? So, those guys. And again, DB wise, I just think there's so many of them. We didn't talk about Arnold from Alabama, and then the kid from Michigan. I mean, we go on and on about those. So, but I think some of those reach guys are going to be. And one last one, Cam Hart out of from Notre Dame. He had a great combine. He's a corner. He's 6'3". He's another one of those long guys that, he's probably going to fall, probably not going to be, in those top, but he may be a, late third, fourth rounder. So.
All right, James, now over to you. Who are a couple of players that you would like to see the Lions take a look at late in the draft that maybe not everybody's got their attentions on?
A bunch of guys I've looked at. I've kind of tried to figure out who kind of fits the Lions mold of guys, not necessarily who I want, but who I think the Lions would want. Guys who fit the leadership mold, the grit, hard workers, all that. I like Dwayne Carter, the defensive tackle from Duke. This guy who they could maybe get in the 4th or 5th round. Guy was a 3-year captain. Just has, elite intangibles like that, and could kind of be like another Aleem McNeil type player. He's not as big as Aleem McNeil was when they drafted him, but one of those guys who can play the run and have some of a bit of a pass rush too. Somebody a little bit later, Logan Lee, another defensive tackle from Iowa. This could be somewhere around the 5th round, maybe 6th, might even slip to the 6th. He kind of fits that Lions intangibles, just what they're looking for, And then Dijon Anthony, safety from Ole Miss, 6th, 7th round range, fits that need where they need a little bit more depth there at safety after losing a lot of what they had. So he's somebody I think that can develop into one of those roles. And Quantez Stiggers, who's a guy that people have heard about a little bit, and then might get picked like the 7th round. Guy from the CFL, never played college football. Had a whole thing where he was supposed to go to college, and then COVID happened. His dad died, went through depression, worked his way back through this CFL and this other football league that I'd never even heard of. That he played in to get to the CFL, and then dominated in the CFL. And as a cornerback in the CFL, you get put in bad situations because the receivers have a head start. So to play well at corner in the CFL is something. So he's a guy that's supposed to get picked in like maybe the 7th round. So I could see a guy like that being a nice depth corner for him.
He was in one of their top 30 visits too. Yeah. So I was looking at him because that was one of the other ones that I was like, oh my, another CFL guy, but he, they brought him in. So, I mean, those are, I was kind of looking at, when I talked about that, where I looked at last year and this year on guys they brought in and guys that they looked at. But yeah, he was one of the guys that fell into that, out of those 8 cornerbacks that they brought in to talk to. He was one of them. So that's kind of, that's a great call on that one, James.
Now, Coach, you mentioned to me Braylon Trice out of Washington as another name that people might look at late. What can you tell the listeners about Braylon?
I don't know where he's going to fall. He tested fairly well at the combine. But he is, I watched, of course, against, the national championship game and the playoff game. And I watched him both times against Oregon. And I watched him 2 or 3 times because I just love their quarterback and their system. But he's a grinder. He's another one of those guys. When you watch him play, he reminds me of Hutch. He reminds me of that. Pin his ears back and he's going to play to the echo. So, I mean, James, do you think he'll fall that far, Trice?
I don't know. I don't know a whole about him. I know the name. I mean, and seeing
Yeah.
him, I've seen him go fairly early in mocks, just in
Right.
mock drafts. But I mean, you can't judge a whole lot about that because mock draft people are just laymen, you know, doing that. So you can't entirely judge that. But I think he's a person that would fit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, guys, let's talk about roster construction a minute. Something I didn't really prep you guys for, but I have a question because
Mm-hmm.
Coach brought up the potential of drafting a tight end late. We
Mm-hmm.
right now have Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, Mitchell, and Zylstra under contract. They could draft somebody late as the fifth guy. Last year, the Lions carried 3 tight ends, but currently there's no fullback on the Detroit Lions roster. There is that potential they could carry a 4th tight end if they don't carry a fullback. And I've heard some people saying with this new kickoff, we don't know what that's going to do to rosters because a traditional return man might not be the type of guy you want there. And you might want some guys that are different types of blockers that a linebacker or a tight end might fall into. So, do you see a roster construction be a little bit different with this? Coach, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think you do. I think, we did, we fooled around last year with Rodrigo at fullback. And, and that was kind of one of the things. So that's kind of when I looked at that, the kid from K-State, Sinoit, I think is his name. I kept looking at him and go, man, he just would fit into that. And, you got, what's tight end came off injuries. How do you say his last name? Is his knee. I mean, it was his knee, right? He tore up his knee pretty good. So, how's he gonna, for Lions, how is he gonna play? So yeah, and we also, we lost a special teams guy, a guy that's been there with us for 4 years. And so those are gonna be, I think that's a great call. I think you're gonna see a lot more and the emphasis that we have on special teams because they know it's a third of the game. So it's definitely gonna make some changes.
Now, James, I remember last year when you and I were talking early on, you weren't sure they were going to keep a fullback last year on the roster. What are your thoughts going this year? And do you think there's a Lions could take a tight end late or an undrafted guy?
Yeah, I think they totally could do that late. I mean, one of the guys I was going to mention in the sleepers that I didn't get to was Eric All from Iowa, and he's one of those guys that could slide in there and be a guy who can play tight end and maybe a little bit of H-back, fullback for you as well, or free up some room for, as we've mentioned before, that pretty much everybody who played tight end last season for the Lions lined up at fullback at some point during the season last year in an NFL game. So, he could maybe just free up somebody else to do that a little bit more. But they like the Iowa guys and they've worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
Not bad.
And he's supposed to be like, I don't know, 5th round.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's a potential late guy. Now, I think we all probably expect the Lions, they might sign some more free agents yet after the draft, right? Because you're still going to have some spots that maybe you don't know how they're going to work out. I mean, look how late it was that we signed Teddy Bridgewater last year. So we could sign a free agent wide receiver after the draft or a veteran safety. We know how many safeties there are that are out there. So if we don't get a spot we want necessarily in the draft, we could bring a free agent in. But let's wrap up the draft talk by talking about the draft being in Detroit. Now, I know both of you guys are going down to the draft. Coach, you want to get us started? Tell us what your plans are and what you're expecting to see down there.
Well, I've been, as you know, I've been working with Bull Rush and helping work with some guys to get ready for combine. So we have down at the Caucus Club down in Detroit, we have a dinner on Thursday night for the draft. Dave Gregory and some sponsors. I don't know if they rented it out, so we're all going there. I think Marcellus Anderson's going to be there. One of the guys that we've been training. I think he's going to be an undrafted. Cole Spencer, the guy from Texas Tech, should be there. Tavion McCarthy, who blew up the NFL combine or NFL at his pro day at Mercer with that 48-inch vert. So those are all the guys who represent. So I'm gonna spend that night down there. Of course, it's within walking distance from the draft. So gonna leave probably about 8:00 from Bay City, Michigan on Thursday morning, and get to Detroit as early as possible. So really looking forward to that. It's just gonna be a great time. and then going down with a bunch of friends. And you know, we're going to take in a Tiger game on Friday, and we're going to go to this restaurant. I can't remember that restaurant. And we're going to do some bowling. And on Saturday, we're going to come home and stop in Bay City and fish for walleyes. So it's an awesome week, man. I'm really kind of fired up about it. I was hoping the Wings had made the playoffs because I was working on tickets for that too. But oh well, it's to be. So it should be a fun-filled adventure. And my son will be there, Duke, and you know, just a lot of friends, guys that I play college football with and stuff. We're all meeting up, so should be a great time.
That's awesome. You have quite the packed weekend, and I'm glad you're leaving early because I've heard if you're not downtown by noon, it could get pretty messy. So, James, what's your schedule looking like down there, and what are some things you're hoping to see at the draft? Where are you going to be?
Yeah, I got an Airbnb that I reserved months ago, before all the prices went up and stuff. So it's a few miles outside of town, but then we're just hoping to Uber and do everything in Uber because I imagine parking is just going to be crazy. So I didn't want to mess with that. So we're just going to Uber everywhere. Also going to the Tigers game on Friday with a group of friends of mine. Everybody that I know that is from up here that's going down to the draft is also going to the Tigers game on Friday afternoon. So there'll be a lot of Northern Michigan people there at that game.
That makes me think of the time I was at the Final Four in Atlanta, and the Braves had like gone years without selling out a game, and it happened to be their opening game, and it was sold out because everybody that was going to the Final Four was going to the Atlanta Braves game that day too, like the day before. So it's going to be a busy time in Detroit, and I'm expecting the Tigers to have pretty good attendance. It sounds like.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, Northern Michigan representing.
Yeah.
If only Philadelphia had come through for us, maybe have Red Wings, you know.
But
Well, not everyone's going to be able to make it to the NFL draft. I'll be home. I'm not able to make it to the draft, but I'll be watching it on TV. And a few friends of mine and I, we get online and we Zoom and just have a good time together, hanging out, watching it. And so I'll be doing that. But if you want to have a Detroit Lions experience and you can't make it right to Detroit that time on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, here are some things you could do. On the Wednesday, the 24th, in Royal Oak, Detroit Lions basketball is happening. Now, what is that? That's the Detroit Lions Legends. They go around and they help support local communities. And if you go on Wednesday, the 24th, that helps the Oakland County Fraternal Order of Police. And then later in the week, on April 26th, that Friday, if you make your way up north to Alpena at 7 p.m. in the junior high school, the Detroit Lions Legends are going to be there playing basketball. Now, who is this? Who's involved? Well, it's run by Wolverine Productions, and you come see the Lions Legends. I haven't confirmed who's all going to be there, but usually Rob Rubik is heavily involved, as is Herman Moore. Corey Schlesinger was involved there last year, among others. And it's a fun way to do something Detroit Lions related around the draft if you can't make it to Detroit. And you help support a good local community at the same time. And so, in addition to that Friday date in Alpena, on Saturday, the 27th, the last day of the draft, the Lions Legends are going to be in Traverse City and in Cadillac. Now, in Traverse City, they'll be there at Traverse City West at 1 o'clock. And in Cadillac, I believe it's 7 o'clock. And Traverse City, it supports the Grand Traverse County Deputy Sheriff's Association. And in Cadillac, it helps support the Cadillac Firefighters Association. So, again, if you want to do something with a family, Detroit Lions involved, and you can't make it to the draft, this is a good other way to get involved and do something football related, tying into the NFL draft.
should be nice, man. Should be nice. And being able to get out there and supporting, you know, especially they're all good causes too. So that's good stuff.
All right, guys. Well, this show has gone long. This is one of our longer shows. So it's time to wrap it up. Any final thoughts that we want to put out there about the jerseys, about the draft, anything we've talked about? James, let's start with you.
I don't know. A couple other guys kind of look at in the middle, late rounds, I think would be Malik Mustafa, safety from Wake Forest. He's like around 4-ish. Keaton Oladapo, safety from Oregon State, around 4 or 5-ish. He's another guy who could kind of fill that depth, that we've talked about that they currently don't have at safety because they've had a couple of guys at free agency. Although there's some hints that Tracy Walker may be back in town here, coming back. And then I think another guy who might be available in the 7th round is Kingsley Equigan, center from Florida. I think he's a kind of maybe a little bit more of a project at this point, but somebody that I could see the Lions taking a gamble on that late in the draft.
All right, Coach, how about you? Any final thoughts?
And again, go back to that safety thing. I'm glad he brought that up because Mustafa was one of the ones that I written down because, it's from Wake Forest. But he also had a formal at the combine. And then, of course, I think it's Vakai from Utah. He also had a formal at the combine. And those are two safeties. That's the only two safeties that you could find any information that they've been in contact with other than combine stuff. And I heard Dan Campbell the other day talk about he loves the interviews at the combine after those guys work out. So that maybe James might be onto something there. Just saying.
One other thought I guess I have on the Detroit Lions new uniforms is super thrilled, like I said, about the blue and white. That's classic. That's maybe my childhood. That's the 90s with Spielman and Lomas and Barry and that great group, Robert Porcher and all the others that contributed to such great teams during that time. And so I love seeing that come back. Huge fan of the blue with the white jersey numbers. And I got to say, the back in black thing, I wasn't excited about the idea. But now that I've seen the idea put into play, it's growing on me pretty quickly. I think it's going to be a great alternative, especially with that blue helmet. So I think the Lions did good with the jerseys. I think they got it right. All right. Well, you guys provided a lot of insight on some deep guys in this draft that, maybe not everybody who's listened to other podcasts and other talk shows has heard about. And so it'll be real interesting to see how the chips fall and what Brad Holmes does with his chips, because we've seen him trade up, we've seen him trade back, and I don't have a strong opinion. I'm going to get my popcorn ready, and I'm going to enjoy this show because I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, James, Coach, thank you guys so much for joining the show.
Yeah, great being here as usual. Always talking. And James, you and I are going to have to hook up down there in Detroit, and we'll send we'll send Matt some pictures.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Safe travels to Detroit. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the draft. And thank you so much for tuning in, folks. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the show. And please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. Until next time, stay gritty, my friends.